Imagine a flock of birds so large they could block out the sun. The passenger pigeon, once one of the most abundant birds in North America, reduced to nothing and disappeared in only a matter of decades. With a staggering population of 3 to 5 billion birds all on the North American continent. This species comprised 25% of the total avifauna in the entirety of North America. But by 1914, the last passenger pigeon passed away in the Cincinnati Zoo. So what happened to it? This is the Extinct Files, the complete story of the passenger pigeon, how it lived, died, and the mysteries surrounding its demise. The passenger pigeon was first described in 1766 by a Swedish biologist named Carl Linnaeus. Now, I mentioned that this bird was so abundant that the flocks could block out the sun for several minutes. So how did this bird become so abundant? Well, for starters, this was a nomadic bird. Basically, it would fly in very large flocks from food source to food source. It bred in massive colonies. All of this stuff we'll get into in detail in just a minute. And it used its large numbers like schooling fish to fool predators and avoid getting captured by a falcon or a hawk. All in all, it relied on these massive flocks to sustain itself. But let's get into the description of what a passenger pigeon actually is. It was a large pigeon with a very long tail. The males were bluish gray and they had more of a rufous reddish chest with black markings on their wings. They also had a patch of iridescence on the back of their neck that was like a purplish hue as well. The females were duller overall and they were mostly brown. It occupied almost the entirety of eastern North America but didn't really go west beyond the Rocky Mountain range. There are rare records of it visiting more of those western states as well, all the way down to Mexico, but it typically stayed in the eastern North America region up to Canada on that eastern side. It occupied primarily deciduous forests and especially beech trees and oak trees. And it liked these forests because it fed primarily on beech nuts and acorns. It would often eat sometimes in farmers' fields and then it would retreat back into that forested area where it would nest or roost. During the breeding season, it occupied these beech and oak forests and they would form massive nesting colonies. Like I mentioned, this is a bird that relied heavily on beech nut and acorns, and it relied particularly on a phenomenon known as mast. Now, what is mast? Mast is essentially when trees will produce a ton more seeds than is necessary. Essentially, they'll overproduce, which basically guarantees that some of those seeds will make it through the feeding season where these birds will form massive flocks. And the passenger pigeon relied on these mast time periods. Now, what was life like as a passenger pigeon? Well, it didn't really migrate. Like I mentioned before, it's a nomadic species and it would just kind of follow the food source. So it did migrate because snow would come in and the birds wouldn't really be relying on those seeds anymore, but not in the way of going north to south. These birds truly just followed their food supplies and they would go from forest to forest consuming the seeds. They would also move to avoid bad weather. They particularly did not like snow, so when a bad snowstorm would be coming through late in the season, they would move away to try to avoid such things. But once the snow was gone, the passenger pigeons wouldn't be far behind, moving northward for breeding. Simon Pokagon, which was a leader of the Potawatomi people, he wrote in 1895, "I have seen them move in one unbroken column for hours across the sky, like some great river. I have stood by the grandest waterfall of America, yet never have my astonishment, wonder, and admiration been so stirred as when I have witnessed these birds drop from their course like meteors from heaven." Most of this movement would actually take part during the day, which is kind of unique. Most birds nowadays move during the night, but the passenger pigeon primarily moved from feeding area to feeding area during the daytime. Now in flight, they were very agile flyers. Their speed and their ability to change direction on a whim was unmatched. And all of this was adapted to avoid predators. So the next time you see your local flock of pigeons or mourning doves, pay attention to them flying through the air. They will slice and dice at rapid speeds, again, adapted to avoid predators. The passenger pigeon, however, probably flew faster than all of these birds that we have today. Audubon describes their flight noise as something extraordinary, saying it was a hard gale at sea passing through the rigging of a close reefed vessel. Now, I don't necessarily know what that last part means, as I'm not a sailor myself, but I imagine that hundreds of thousands of birds flying through the air would create a spectacular noise. Nestings began in April throughout its range, and again, they formed extremely large colonies that they called cities. The largest of these colonies was 2,216 square kilometers, which is absolutely insane, and they label this as a conservative estimate as well. But the average size of these colonies was still very large at 70 square kilometers. That requires a lot of forest to sustain this bird species, but we'll get into that in just a minute. There are records of solitary nesting passenger pigeons, so they weren't completely reliant on these massive colonies to be able to nest, but this will certainly play a factor either way as we move forward. The nest was a very shallow circular bowl, and it was made mostly of dead twigs, and this was woven together. The eggs were white and they had no markings, and they would only lay, according to our records that we have, and this is incomplete information, they would only lay one egg. When the babies were born, they were altricial, meaning that they're basically naked and hopeless, relying completely on their parents. Like other columbids, which is the family that passenger pigeon finds itself in, the parents produced a milk-like substance which the babies fed on for the first couple days. Unfortunately, this made the babies very fat and very desirable for humans to come in and pluck them from the nest, becoming a major food source in North America. Luckily, after 3 to 4 days, these passenger pigeons' little babies were able to actually fly. So that window is very small, but humans became very honed in on exactly when to raid these nesting sites. Passenger pigeons, like I mentioned, preferred to eat beech nuts, acorns, and chestnuts during the cooler months of the year, and then during the warmer months of the year, basically the summer, they fed on fruits. They would forage in flocks of tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands, and they do this on the ground. They would swallow the larger nuts whole, and then their gizzards would crush up those nuts, making them digestible. At times, they would also go and raid farmers' fields, and a flock of this size would decimate farmers' crops, but despite this, there aren't really any evidence suggesting that this had a major impact on agriculture in North America. And then another cool thing, like most columbids, these pigeons were able to suck water like a straw. Most birds, they have to scoop the water and then tilt their necks back to swallow. Passenger pigeons have a straw for a beak, and they just suck the water straight up, which is kind of a unique thing amongst birds. Like a lot of these extinct species, we don't know exactly what they sounded like. In fact, most of the stuff that we know about passenger pigeons and their vocalizations come from captive birds at one aviary. But they weren't musical like other pigeons. You typically hear, like, the mourning dove has a very musical call that sounds very beautiful and like someone in mourning. The passenger pigeon had a very harsh keek, keek, or teet, teet type call, and imagine tens or hundreds of thousands of these birds doing that at the same time. It would be very disorienting for any predator trying to come after these birds. There's one story from history. Aldo Leopold, a very famous author and conservationist, said, "The passenger pigeon was no mere bird. He was a biological storm. He was the lightning that played between two biotic poles of intolerable intensity, the fat of the land and his own zest for living. Yearly the feathered tempest roared up, down, and across the continent, sucking up the laden fruits of the forest and prairie, burning them in a traveling blast of life. Like any other chain reaction, the pigeon could survive no diminution of his own furious intensity. Once the pigeoners had subtracted from his numbers, and once the settlers had chopped gaps in the continuity," that's a hard word to say, continuity, "of his fuel, his flame guttered out with hardly a sputter or even a wisp of smoke." And this was written in 1947, which was about 30 years after the end of the passenger pigeon. Real quick, some fun facts about the passenger pigeon before we get to its demise. Most of the passenger pigeon's behavior can actually be attributed to its adaptations to overcome predators. The large flocks, the agile flight, all of that is to combat things like the peregrine falcon, prairie falcon, basically any type of falcon or hawk that wants to scoop them straight from the air. That's where the passenger pigeon gets all of its defense mechanisms, which is the really cool thing in evolution. Now, this is where humans come in and kind of ruin the story of the passenger pigeon. The destruction of the large deciduous forests in the east was kind of the precursor to the end of the passenger pigeon. And this, combined with hunting and the extraction of these birds for the market, reduced this population to nothing. But how could this wipe out a population of billions of birds? We know humans overconsume constantly, but a lot of creatures with a lot less populations are still around today. So what happened to the passenger pigeon? Well, for starters, unlike the Carolina parakeet, there's no real evidence that disease played a major role. This was very human driven. And there's two main reasons for this. The first one is habitat destruction, and the second one, like I mentioned, is hunting and overconsumption of the pigeons as a food source. So first, the trees went, and that weakened the population. Deforestation played a major role in the destruction of the passenger pigeon's food source. This segmented the population. This made the populations a lot weaker. It made their nesting sites a lot smaller. And this was a key role or first step in the demise of the passenger pigeon. Ornithologist Alexander Wilson in 1812 mentioned the roosts being attacked by people with guns, clubs, long poles, pots of sulfur, and in a few hours, sacks of passenger pigeons would be carried away. So first we destroy their habitats, their nesting sites, their food source, and then we attack their nesting colonies. Now, passenger pigeons were a huge industry for human consumption, and so this motivated a lot of people to go out and just kill a ton of these birds. Humans would actually even bait the species with grain, and then they would net an entire flock of these birds in the hundreds at a time. But again, this doesn't explain why the most abundant bird in North America eventually went extinct. Yes, you can net hundreds of these birds at a time, but what about billions? Enter the railroad and the telegraph. These two new technologies made it possible for this netting and capturing of passenger pigeons to blow up into an entire continental scale. In fact, there were 600 plus professional pigeon catchers around the country that can now effectively communicate and travel to destroy this population of birds. The birds were now consumed and hunted at all times of the year, not allowing sufficient time for them to replenish their populations. In 1851, an estimated 1.8 million pigeons were sent to New York City on one trip. 1.8 million in one trip. Because they nested in such large numbers, this made it possible for 1 million birds a day to be captured, killed, and then delivered as a food source. But overhunting wasn't the main reason for their demise. What actually happened is the passenger pigeons learned from this behavior, and they started to abandon their nesting sites early, before babies could finish developing or even be born. And so what actually happens is we decimate all of these young birds year after year, which doesn't make it possible for the birds to reproduce. And then we also make the birds scared to even attempt nesting, so they're not even trying at this point to have nestlings and replenish their population. Now, I mentioned deforestation, so I want to go back to that real quick. I forgot one thing. In 1870, they developed another new technology, the sawmill, which sped up the deforestation of all of these important forests, reducing the nesting areas and sites away from humans even further, making it near impossible for the passenger pigeon to pounce back. Market hunting didn't end for the passenger pigeon until 1893. And by this time, there's only a couple thousand, maybe even just 1,000 of these birds left in the entirety of North America. These birds had such large numbers because their nests were actually pretty low to the ground, and predators were able to get to these nests very easy. Now, the reason the passenger pigeon was able to survive is because there were so many of them. But now that the population is smaller, not just humans are taking advantage of the remaining birds, but so are the predators. And so between the predators and the humans, I guess we're predators too, there's no way this bird can properly bounce back without its large number defense mechanism. So the bird was wiped out by humans, as is almost always the case in these stories, and the destruction of forests and the creation of a pigeon market were the main reasons for its extinction. Now, pigeons continued to nest in colonies until 1887, just 6 years before market hunting ended. Now, why did market hunting end? Because there were no pigeons left. So it was no longer an industry to make money from, which is kind of a disgusting thing to think about. We didn't stop until we couldn't go any longer. Now, the passenger pigeon and the almost extinction of the American bison was basically the wake-up call to humankind that we could cause extinctions. We had done it many times before with things like the dodo, but this was the first time that it was concentrated in humans' minds of the capabilities that we have to decimate large populations. Several states in response to this passed laws to protect the pigeon, but then they didn't enforce them, and the birds were continuously killed in these states as well. The last reliable wild sighting of the passenger pigeon was in 1900, where a young boy hunted one in Ohio. We do have a few other records. In 1902, there was another one that was shot or claimed to be shot without substantial evidence. And then in 1907, President Theodore Roosevelt, who sometimes shared a lot of tall tales, claimed to have seen a small flock flying over as well. In 1914, the last passenger pigeon died in captivity, and this was, oddly enough, in the Cincinnati Zoo. This pigeon was named Martha, and so it's the most famous passenger pigeon. But the odd thing about this is that in 1914, it passed away in an enclosure where just several years later, the last Carolina parakeet would also pass away at the same zoo in the exact same enclosure. An odd coincidence, but definitely worth mentioning. So what does this story teach us about conservation? Well, first of all, I guess we haven't learned anything from the lessons from this. Birds are still going extinct by the billions, but there is still hope to save them. We have a long way to go, but there are many people who care about bird species who do not want to let any creature go extinct, and that's enough for us to hold on to that hope. As long as there is a large number of people who care, this should not happen again. It is happening, but we're fighting back. The closest living relative to the passenger pigeon is actually the band-tailed pigeon, and its numbers are declining as well. It's still listed as a species of least concern. There are definitely birds who need our help more than the band-tailed pigeon, but the band-tailed pigeon has been decreasing by 2% in population since 1960 every single year. And a big reason for its demise is the same reason as the passenger pigeon: habitat loss. Now, many of you ask in my videos about de-extinction in the comments, and they are trying to genetically modify a band-tailed pigeon to make it a passenger pigeon. Once again, I reiterate, de-extinction isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's not going to be a passenger pigeon no matter how many genes you edit. It's always going to be a genetically modified band-tailed pigeon. It's not a bad thing, but the danger that with de-extinction is that we'll stop trying now to save species because we can always bring them back later. It's not going to be the same thing. We need to save the species now and leave de-extinction as more of a novelty. All right, guys, my phone died actually right before I ended that last video, so I'm just gonna end it right here. Happy New Year's to everybody. It is New Year's Eve right now, if you can hear the explosions of the fireworks going on. But yeah, the passenger pigeon is an amazing bird. Make sure you go check out Bright-Eyed Birding. I do weekly adventures where I take you birding with me and we find some amazing birds that are still with us today. Also, let me know which extinct species I should cover next here on the channel. We've done the Carolina parakeet and now the passenger pigeon. Which one would you like to see next? Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you all next time on Bright-Eyed Birding Learn.